once I left the military, as I was living in life now and going after and doing these survival challenges, I started realizing how much I really need to be out in the wilderness, because, you know, that's basically my church out there. That's where I hear God's voice loudest.
Welcome to the Top Down Podcast. My name is Josh Mastel, your host and the CEO of Uproar Partners. We drive growth for business owners and startups by owning their sales process and their go-to-market execution. Today we are talking to EJ Skullcrusher Snyder. He's a professional survivalist, spent 25 years in the U.S. military. You've probably seen him on shows like Survivor, Dual Survivor, Naked and Afraid XL. This guy is a monster. He's a beast. He's a hardcore guy, and I can't wait to see some of the light he's going to shed for us on how to really survive out there in the business world and the entrepreneurship world and the startup world. All right, EJ, the Skullcrusher Snyder, my man, it's great to have you on. I've been looking forward to having you on the podcast for a long time. One, because I'm a fan of yours. Listeners, you obviously know this from the intro we just gave here, but EJ was on the show Naked and Afraid, one of my favorite shows of all time. So it's great to have you on. I appreciate the time.
Hey, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Nothing I like better than getting on and talking about life, talking about the challenges in life and getting through it in tough days. And as you know, I've been through a lot of them. You see me out there 3 times on Naked and Afraid, see me out there on Dual Survival and a bunch of other TV shows. And, I got a lot of things going on in my life, so I'm happy to come on here and share about what I'm doing.
I love it, man. I appreciate that. Why don't you go ahead, and I think it might be good just to give the listeners just kind of a deep dive into your life. Like, what do you have going on right now, and maybe a little summary of kind of, what happened prior to you being on those shows where we know you, on the television. Give us kind of catch us up to date, like who is EJ Snyder?
All right, that's easy to do. EJ Snyder's a poor kid from some tough Italian neighborhoods in upper north side of Jersey, just outside New York City. I grew up kind of poor and didn't have a lot going on in my life. When my folks divorced, my dad used to come back and, my dad used to take us out hunting and trapping and fishing and doing all those outdoor things, so I really took to that stuff. So when I turned 19, I joined the Army, and I served in the Army for 25 years. I was a 91 Gulf War vet, and then I went on to fight in Iraqi Freedom from 2004-2005 for 15 months. I retired at the rank of Sergeant Major, was an airborne paratrooper with the 82nd, was in the Rangers. And in the Army is where I learned formal survival. I got formal survival training in the Army. I was a primary survival instructor in the Florida swamps down in Eglin Air Force Base, Florida. I was a tracking instructor down there as well. So I did that, and then I took to survival just like a fish to water. It was just my thing. And I wanted to be the best survivalist on the planet to survive bad days as they came. So as I retired from the Army, I started getting involved with TV a little bit and doing some acting and stunt work stuff. And then I came to the Fort Bragg, North Carolina area and became a SEER instructor for 5 years with the Special Warfare Center, teaching Green Berets and other soldiers how to survive behind enemy lines. And as I was going along with life, I applied for a few reality shows, and people started figuring out who I am. And next thing I know, I got recruited by Discovery. And, so Discovery found me and recruited me to try out for Dual Survival. I wound up, another guy wound up getting the gig right over top of me, but then I wound up on Naked Afraid. I did Naked Afraid, the very first episode ever, filmed in Africa. After I got done filming that one, 7 months later, I went back to the Amazon, did a second 21-day challenge, and then 15 months later, wound up on the 40-day Naked Afraid XL challenge. And then my partner Jeff and I from the XL challenge wound up doing Dual Survival Season 9, and I just got done filming a show called First Man Out with Ed Stafford early in the year. And so what I've been doing lately is I do a lot of motivational speaking. I do a lot of appearances at trade shows, gun and knife shows, survival expos, and, I teach survival, I teach team building and leadership training quite a bit, and I'm actually running a couple kids' adventure camps this summer.
Awesome, man. You're a busy guy. I love it. First of all, thank you for your service in the U.S. military. It means a lot. You have the nickname Skullcrusher. Where's that from?
Okay, that comes back from the days I got bullied as a kid quite a bit, and I actually learned how to box and wrestle to start building up some of my self-confidence to kind of stand up to some of that stuff. And then a bunch of my buddies also would go to, I couldn't afford karate, but whatever they would learn at class, I'd have them teach me. And then I started standing up for myself. And then while I was in the Army, I would get into, some scraps here and there in the barracks or do these boxing smokers. And then these guys would, they would say I would hit them so hard that it felt like their head was caving in. And so, soldiers give you nicknames and you wind up with the nickname. So that's where it comes from.
I love it. Well, hey, you mentioned earlier, so to give this some context, our listeners are typically founders of, startups, tech startups, or business owners who are running, entrepreneurs running their own businesses. And you mentioned earlier that you took to survival earlier, and I always like to apply starting a business. I run my own business in the early days. Keeping your business alive is survival. And you mentioned you took to survival at an early age into the Army. Why was that? What was it about the idea of survival that you love so much?
Well, the thought of going out into the wild with virtually nothing, and then surviving, and being able to get out of a bad situation and use the resources around you to do it with nothing as maybe as little as just a knife out there, or knowing how to find the right materials and the right wood to make a fire out of by friction. That fascinated me. And to be able to teach others to do it, there's 3 things on this planet I think people should know how to do. Basic first aid, because it'll save your life and someone else's. Know how to swim, and basic survival.
Yeah. That's awesome. All right. So do you think it's like a competitive nature inside of you that, like, you look at being out in nature and having to beat it and survive it? Is it a competitive thing, or is it you're a connection to the earth and planet and nature that you like surviving with? Right. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, when it first started out, I'm very competitive. Always an athlete my whole life, always competing, love to compete, play games and win. It's about you always winning. And taking that drive out into the wilderness and then being humbled by Mother Nature and learning how to work with her in conjunction with everything, that is so humbling that I started becoming more attached to the earth and its healing ways, which was very good for me later on in life. Once I left the military, as I was living in life now and going out there and doing these survival challenges, I started realizing how much I really need to be out in the wilderness, because that's basically my church out there. That's where I hear God's voice loudest.
Love that. So you mentioned being humbled by Mother Nature. You got any good stories of some big punches in the face you've taken out there trying to survive?
Yeah, I mean, when we were out there in the Amazon, you wouldn't think in the middle of the jungle you could possibly catch hypothermia. But there was a terrible rainstorm came in one night, and it rained on us for almost 5 hours, and we really didn't have much of an area to get sheltered up in, because we're in the middle of the Amazon River, and it's basically a big overflooded lake area. And there was just really nowhere to go and get sheltered. So, that's the closest I think I've ever came to getting hypothermia. And, it's very humbling, because you try to do all the things right to keep from getting that state. And the big thing for me out there is never giving up and never quitting, no matter what. So, but yeah, Mother Nature humbles you quite a bit.
So let's go into some of those scenarios where you're faced with, like, man, you're at your wit's end. I think our listeners could agree with some of these feelings of you got a business you're trying to build, or a new idea you're trying to get out there. Nothing's going right. You're trained to do this, but you're just hitting roadblocks in every angle. And what you just mentioned with that attitude of never giving up and never quitting, what are some things you rely on when you're in those moments? Like, do you have sometimes you remember you're in those moments where you're like, dude, I want to quit. And what did you rely on to pull yourself through?
Right. Most people, the average person, they can get into a real quagmire if they're not mentally tough and let certain things like fear cripple them or beat them, or just quitting or giving up totally, And if you do that in those situations out in the wild, you could lose your life. And so I have a motto I live by, Tu Esponte Superstes, which is Latin for survive by your own accord, basically by your own will. And what that means is, through life we go through certain challenges in life. You get bullied, you go through a tough day at work or college issues or struggles. Some people face life-threatening illnesses. What gets you through that? Those things that you survive when you get knocked down to the ground. It's what do? Do you get back up, smile, dust yourself off, and keep moving? Or do you curl up into a little ball like a little baby and suck on your thumb and cry?
and just say, oh, he's me. So I've always been the kind of guy that gets up, and if you hit me in the face, I'm going to hit you back twice as hard, and I'm going to keep moving. Because that's what I rely on. It's that mental toughness. It's knowing that there's always one more thing you can do in a situation, whether survival or otherwise. What is that thing I'm missing? And just never giving up. I mean, just the fact of quitting to me and just failing myself is just, it's too great for me to even think about. And so that's what pushes me through. Like I said, I've been a kind of guy that's been through a lot of tough things in my life, you know, from my folks, you know, getting divorced when I was very young, to, you know, getting picked on and bullied and just different things that you just, you know, if you don't like what's going on in your life, I've learned early on that I couldn't rely on anybody else but myself. If I wanted something to happen, it was going to be on me. And so I am the kind of guy that will it and make it happen. If I put my mind to it, that's just what's going to happen. And so, you know, I just have an attitude of staying positive, not giving up, and just having some grit, you know, just a little grit in yourself to get through things, knowing that it could always be worse. As long as I'm breathing and I'm standing and I'm not 6 foot under the ground, I'm in good shape.
You mentioned fear earlier. You sound like a tough guy. I'd be intimidated by you if I didn't have you in my corner for sure. What when you're out in the survival situations, there's got to be some things that you don't like to deal with, some things that are maybe some fearful, you know, that seem fearful to you. What are your fears out there?
My thing is fear cripples action. I'm the kind of guy when I get in a situation, I allow my actions to dictate the situation, not reverse, not let the situation take control of me and dictate the actions I'm going to take. I stay flexible, I'm adaptable, but fear, you know, if you become fearful, you know, animals can smell that. There's a pheromone, literally a pheromone that will go out in the air, and they will smell that. And you really don't want to put that out there. So for me, it's all about controlling it. You know, there's things to be concerned about. I always have concerns. I always have some respect, healthy respect for things like venomous snakes and different things like that, because when you're dealing with dangerous things, you don't want to make the situation worse. That being crossing the ravine, a river that could drown you, and you know, especially when you're out there with other people, you've got a responsibility to each other to not take some crazy risks and take care of each other. And the situation's always better when you have a few more hands to help with tasks and a few more heads to think of great ideas. So, you know, the best thing to do is just to stay motivated. And if you're in a group situation and people are starting to get down on themselves, you know, you got to lean on each other, and sometimes you have to pick up the slack for the other person and just, you know, shoulder the task. So there comes a point, even for me, which I never thought would happen, where it was very difficult for me to always ask for help or reach out to somebody. But in a couple of the Naked Afraid challenges, I was humbled to that, and I realized the power in that. And so, you know, I always go out on these challenges or go out into the wild, and I wind up coming back a better man. I'm more involved in a better survivalist, and I always learn something. I always get humbled, and I find something out about myself I didn't know before.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I do want to segue into that idea of, you know, when you're out there, teamwork is important. Being, you know, leadership, fellowship is important. What are some, do you have some stories from your time out there when you're with some of the bigger groups where you really learn the importance of how a team can achieve really crazy things, or the vice versa? If you're not willing to be a part of the team or follow leadership, it can be super dangerous.
Yeah. Well, when you go into group dynamics versus solo survival, there's a lot of things got to be into consideration. When you're dealing, you know, if you come from a military leadership type background like I came from, some people aren't, you know, they're just not open to a militant kind of style of leadership, or even if it would help or make sense. And so, you know, you're always evolving. You're learning that, you know, communal leadership is a little bit different than what military rank and structure leadership is. And that was something I got humbled a little bit out on my larger challenge was, you know, there was two different philosophies out there on the challenges where we were at. There was more of a easy go, slower approach, and more methodical, just kind of seizing opportunities and just trying to, you know, make the most of those opportunities, to where I had already survived on my first challenge, thrived on my second challenge. I was out there with already a conceived plan to dominate my environment and my zone, and just, I didn't know if I was ever going to go back out again, so I wanted to really get everything I could out of it. And so that thought process, that strategy really overtook everything for me, and it caused me to become actually a little rigid and not open and flexible to some other dynamics, which kind of cheated me on some lessons I could have learned. So, you always got to, and it's hard when you're out there and you're hungry and you're stressed out and people haven't had a cheeseburger in a while, they get hangry. And you think you're on point and sharp mentally, but you're strained out there and you're not thinking as sharp and as clearly as you could, like you were out there only for a week. You're out there week 6. Wow, your brain's a lot more challenged to take simpler tasks and handle them as easy as you did on the first week. So
you really find out who people are when the going gets really tough. The cards
right.
really come out about people's character and what they're even able to do, right?
And then group survival, a lot of times, people got to put their egos aside and you got to throw all the resumes on the table. And whoever's the best person to organize and lead that group, everyone's got to come to agreement on it. And we tried to, with the group I was in, we were 3 alpha males, and we were like, well, whoever's best at certain things, they'll lead that particular task, and then the other guys will just fall in line. And that's how we managed to have a smooth ride. But I would have liked for the group to have had everyone pair up with people they get along with and operated on a circular system where one day a group of 2 would stay in the camp and do camp tasks like gather firewood, keep the water boiling, fix the shelter, clean the area up, and cook any food that came in or whatever. And then have the other, maybe, let's say there was 4 other groups of 2, you'll say you have 5 groups of 2, send out 3 other groups of 2 to go hunting, gathering, fishing, whatever, bring back some food and some resources, and then have 2 other people just take a day off. Just do whatever. You want to sleep, you want to go wash, you want to just sing or just sleep or whatever, so you have a down day, so you keep the brain fresh. But that was my theory of how possibly would have worked better for folks out there. But, like I said, everybody has their own ideas on things, and you got to get people that are great.
Now, I know you mentioned earlier that the hypothermia is one of the scariest moments that you really thought you were in some trouble. What was the most uncomfortable? I'm sure the hypothermia was too, but what's the most like angry, irritated, uncomfortable you've been? Was it hunger? Was it heat? Was it bug bites? What was it?
Probably in the Amazon, where we also had the hypothermia situation happen. We had so many mosquitoes would come out and just start gobbling on us, like 10,000 per square foot, it felt like. That it was maddening. It literally was maddening. And you had to literally sit there and wait for them to finish the cycle because they went off the moon cycle. I don't know if it was the moonlight or what. And they would literally sit out there from anywhere from 20 minutes to, I think, one time up to 4 hours. We were just getting pummeled by these mosquitoes, just eating us alive. And it was god-awful, boy. But you get through it. You sit there with your partner, and you're both suffering together, and you're doing what we call the mosquito dance, kind of clearing mosquitoes from your head to your toe, and then you start reciting what meals you start with the appetizer, and you go to the main the salad, then the main course, and you start reciting what the menu you're going to eat when you get out of there. And when you've gotten back to that same full menu on the 5th time, it's been a bad night.
Wow, that's some great advice of an entrepreneur or a business owner in a tough situation, and you go back to the dream of what you want to build, and that kind of helps remind you of you can endure this right now because I got my eye focused on the
exactly.
So that's what you're trying to do there, huh? That's really great.
Yeah. You get your mind off of kind of the pain and the problem right now. Remember why you're out there, and whatever it's going to take to get through it. Whatever it takes.
That's great.
Because I'm living proof. At 18, my mother said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I said, "I'll be an actor and a stuntman." She's like, "Oh, that's a terrible idea. You'll starve. You'll never make it. It's just competitive. It's very tough." And so I went in the Army, and here I am full circle at 52 on TV, doing things with TV and entertainment and motivating and inspiring people through a venue I never thought I would be on.
That's really cool. So I'm an avid watcher of the show. I've watched it since it started, and I feel like as many people fail as make it through, if not more. You probably know the exact stats of how many people fail. When you're watching the show, or from your experience being on it, is there any common themes you see in the people who fail?
No, I used to think that maybe there's a reason why that happens, but I got to an acceptance point of people say out there when you don't make it, they tap out. And I took TAP and made it an acronym, TAP, totally at peace. And when you become totally at peace, that means you're at a decision point for you, that you're comfortable with for you, to either whether it's medically been decided for you or you just have had enough. You've gone as far as you can, you've taken all you can, you just check out. There's I think there's nothing on those people that just can't make it, but not everybody's made to be a lion. Not everybody's made to be on top. And if you don't want to be falling by the wayside and you want to be on top, you better get a killer instinct. Everyone wants to be a beast when it's time to do what beasts do, and you just better figure out what that is. Yeah. And understand that sometimes you got to do tough things if you want to get to the top and see your dreams and goals come true. You've got to make some tough choices, and sometimes people aren't going to like the decisions you're making. But if you want to succeed, someone has to be in charge, and if it's your life and you're doing your thing, you have to be in charge of your life and make those decisions that are going to best be made for yourself.
I kind of think of that a lot of time in terms of if you want to have an XYZ life, or you want to make it to day 21, or you want to do, whatever it is, there's certain sacrifices you have to make. Like for you to have that life that you want, you need to sacrifice now. What did your experiences in survival and what you know about survival and being on the shows, what kind of sacrifices did you have to make out there as you're trying to survive to get to the end?
You got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. You have to compromise when you have a partner out there. Maybe you don't see eye to eye. You've got to come to an agreement point. And, I always have a positive outlook on everything. And so I don't really look at making sacrifices. I just do the work and get it done, whatever you got to get done, whatever it takes. So, you push hard, you work hard, you may lose a little sleep, you may sacrifice some of that, you may sacrifice some of your health and body to get through it because you work a little harder, you're not getting as much food in you. But in the end, you got to make risk versus reward choices that pay off.
Sure. Love that. And you mentioned earlier you grew up in the Army, you're served in the Army for a long time, and I respect the military so much. I know I talk with a lot of folks from the military because I love their leadership styles and qualities, and grew up in a military family myself. Fortunate to be raised with that level of discipline. And why do you think the Army or in the military in general is so good at creating leaders? What is it about the military or your experience in the military that helps mold you to who you are?
Well, I believe some folks are natural leaders and they just have those innate abilities to be a leader, be an alpha. But in the military, we have a very structured environment that's a rank system, and we have certain levels of leadership. So you start with basic leadership, then you go to you start with your primary leadership courses where you're just starting to learn about leadership. Then you go to a basic course, and so you learn a little bit more in-depth management stuff. Then you go to advanced, then you go to executive level. So it's about getting the schooling and putting your people in tough situations and testing them. The military puts us in situations where it's as realistic to war as we can to make sure that when we're actually in war, the decisions we're making are split-second decisions in milliseconds sometimes. So I've adapted that same strategy of thinking when I go out on survival missions, that I'm thinking and so fast that normal people would say, oh, he's moving pretty quick. But in my time, in the military mindset, I'm making decisions as I'm going very relatively quick, processing a lot of information very quickly, and that gives me an edge.
You grew up poor, you mentioned earlier as well, and I grew up in a similar situation that I'm very thankful for, a broken family. And it really made me who I am today. It turned me into a bit of a survivor, a fighter myself. What did you, looking back on that, obviously you mentioned earlier you're grateful for that situation. It is what it is. How did that help shape you into who you are today?
Well, it makes you appreciate life. It makes you, when you get some nice things in your life or you get a reward or something, you value it a little bit more. You cherish it in terms of being very appreciative. But also, for me, it was, if you go without and you don't have a lot of things, you don't know any different. And so you don't look for luxury items so much, and it's I've always been a simpler man, and would probably be I'm most happiest when I don't have a lot of things around and to worry about. It's just it takes a lot of stress out of your life. Honestly, you don't have to worry about some of those things. So I just think it made me appreciate life and wanting to be more successful and then have a better life for my kids than I have.
That's awesome. And so you're working with a lot of companies these days. You said, you got to do some public speaking and some motivational speaking. I'm sure you're working, corporate America, I'm sure, wants to suck all the knowledge they possibly can out of a guy like you that's got so many principles that, that his businesses need so desperately. What are you seeing out there? Like when you're going into some of these companies doing some speaking, what are some of the things that you're seeing out there that are areas of improvement that you feel like you can really add some value?
Well, it's a matter of people just understanding basic leadership and teamwork and doing team building, but getting put in scenarios where they have to work those in very unique situations, work those decision-making process with their wheels and supervising folks and doing things outside the box that will challenge them to give them self-confidence. It's about building up the confidence in your leaders and showing them that you have the confidence in them to lead and that you're going to trust them to make the right decisions, but also training them and giving them the right challenges to hone those skills. So you can go to my website, ejsnyder.com, if you want to contact me about any of that stuff, and we'll answer the emails. But, when I motivationally speak, I talk about resiliency, success, going through, getting through life and going through hard times and relating some of the stuff I've been through in my life to what people can use to make themselves better leaders or better individuals and have that winner's attitude.
That's awesome. So if you were to summarize, if there was some kind of award someone could get or a stamp of approval or a badge that says, hey, you're a survivalist, whether it's in nature or it's in building a business or whatever it is, what would you say are the top 3 things that make someone maybe the top 3 most important things to make someone really a survivalist? I'm talking about like qualities, internal things, not ability to build fire, or ability to. What are the top 3 qualities?
Yeah, it would be 1, developing an iron will, a will that is steadfast in purpose, focus, and never giving up. So a will is very important. Developing your mental toughness, the ability that when things get really bad, you can take it. You don't quit. You can continue to process through the problem with all your education, your knowledge, and your experience. And then lastly is being a good planner. Having a good plan and not being so rigid in the plan, but remaining flexible and adaptable and improvise as you have to go to make sure that your plan, the final goal of that plan, whatever it is, you get there.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes.
That's awesome, man. Well, hey, EJ Skullcrusher Snyder, the man, it's been a pleasure. Why don't you go ahead and let the listeners know one more time and spell it out for them, your email address, the website where they can look you up and do some of the stuff so they can get in touch with you. We
have a contact form. You can get a hold of me there at www.ejsnyder.com. I've got gear stuff there. I've got stuff about my show, stuff about me, and services that we're working on that we offer through survival training, leadership team building, adventure training. You can follow me at Twitter or Instagram at EJ Snyder333. We'd love to have you over there. You can find me on LinkedIn under EJ Snyder. And we're running this July, 2 kids summer camps, Alpha Extreme Adventure for kids to find their inner alpha. They're overnight 6-day camps right here in Rockfish, North Carolina at Camp Rockfish. And you can go to www.camprockfish.org and sign up for one of those 2 courses we got coming up in July. It's for kids, basically middle school and high school. And it's only $999 to get meals, lodging, zip lining, high ropes training, leadership, and team building exercises. And we're going to do outdoor and survival wilderness training.
That's awesome, man. I really appreciate that. And I guess a couple last quick questions at the end just for fun that I'm personally curious about. I'm sure listeners are too. What's the grossest thing you've had to eat out there?
Tadpole soup. Never put it past your lips. Sucks.
I love it. And how about have you ever been, how about sickness-wise? Have you ever gotten malaria from getting bit? Like, what kind of sicknesses?
Never been sick. Lost a few teeth through malnutrition. But, that's just the price.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Hey, great to have you on. I really appreciate it.
You too, man.
And listeners, go check his stuff out, and we'll be talking to you soon. Best of luck to you.
All right, everyone. Hey, survive on out there, and remember, tough days don't last, but tough people do.
I love it. Thanks so much.